Hello friends, welcome to one more lesson, and in today's lesson we'll be creating our menu but in the WordPress way. And why I'm saying this, it's because if you look at the menu the way it is now, you see that it's a plain HTML menu and it's not editable by your client. For example, if he or she wants to edit it, they will need to edit the actual HTML. Suppose, for example, that your client wants to create a link for an external page or something like that. The only solution that you can offer them for now is to open the index.php file and do the edits directly in the HTML, which is not a good idea. A one-page menu, it's a little trickier for us to build because you need to be aware of some of the rules related to it. But in fact, creating a WordPress menu the way WordPress uses is not that difficult. You have to pay attention to some rules actually. First, you have to register your menu positions in functions.php. Those positions are also called locations in WordPress. The second step will be creating your menu in the dashboard in the WordPress admin itself. And then the third step will be call your menu in the place in the code that you want. For example, this menu here will be placed here instead of this UL. And we have a second menu here at the bottom of the page in which this UL will also be replaced with actual WordPress code. So let's go to our first step. Let's go to our functions.php and we'll be using a WordPress function called register nav menus. And what this function does is it simply registers a navigation menu location for a theme. It's a very powerful function. You can use a lot of arguments within it, and you can, for example, use it to create a simple menu or even a bootstrap, a responsive menu. It accepts an array of arguments. And in this array, we'll be just passing two pieces of code, which is a pair of key values. In the key, we will be adding what WordPress calls a location or a menu position. And in the value, you'll be passing a description for this menu, for this location. So let's go ahead and use them. So let's open an array here. And for the key, let's, for example, color menu, main menu, the menu at the top of the page. And for the description, let's go ahead and use the same text, for example, main menu. And if you want, you can, of course, add one more menu. There's a second menu in the theme, which is a menu where some social icons will be displayed. So we can call this, for example, social media or something like that. Let's describe it as social menu 2. So we have just registered two menu positions here in our WordPress theme. The first one is this one here using this key, this handle, this ID. And the second one is this one here, all right? So this is the first step in order for us to create our menu. Let's go to the second one. We will go over to our admin, and here under appearance, now you see there is a new menu item called menus. So if we click here, this is the menu manager in WordPress. And what we'll be doing here is we'll be creating this menu here and assigning it with one of the menu locations we have just created. So let's give a name to this menu, for example, main menu. This will be for the first of our menus, and we'll be associating it with this first menu here, main menu, which is corresponding to our first menu location registered in the functions.php, all right? Let's go ahead and click create menu. And then if you want, you can, of course, add some pages to it. So let's grab this page here and click on add to menu. And it's already here. You can save it It won't display at the moment in the front end yet, because we need to go to our third step, which will be choosing the location in the template where we need to color menu. So let's go to our index.php now, our template file. And over here is where we'll be placing our menu. So let's cut this UL here because we'll need it later. Let's move it to our temporary file. We'll be needing this because later we'll have to pass this ID here to our menu. We'll see that later. And in place of that code, we'll be calling a PHP function, or I mean a WordPress function called WP nav menu. It also accepts an array of arguments. This function is very powerful. You can use it to create any kind of menu you want, for example, a simple menu or a responsive menu, because there are a bunch of arguments in it. So you can use them, for example, to add a menu class to any element on the menu itself, an ID if you want, the elements you use to wrap some of the elements in the menu. If you want later, you can of course visit the documentation itself of this function by using the ID itself, or just Google for this WP nav menu and you'll find more information in the WordPress official documentation. All right, we'll be using some of those arguments. The first one and the most important one is the one called theme_location. And we'll be passing, of course, the location of the menu we want to be displayed exactly at this place. So the menu we really want to display here is this first one, which has this menu location. Just copy it and place it here. And now if you go ahead and save this and look at the front end, you see that now we have that page that we added to our first menu. So now that we see that everything is working, we can go ahead and add the other menus that we have originally in our template. But before we add the other menu items, you have to be aware, we have to understand actually how that menu, that one page menu really works. So if we go back to that portion of code that we have temporarily moved here, you see that in the href attribute here, we have some kind of IDs. This one is about me, and then we get this works ID and then contact. What happens is that when we click in this about me text, what will happen is that the page will slide smoothly to this portion of the code here with this ID, this section with the ID of about me. And the same goes for the other menu items. So when we click on works, it will slide to this section here with this ID. All right, so it's more or less how this one page menu works. We have to mimic this behavior in our WordPress menu. It's very easy actually. So let's to our admin, to our menu manager, and we can get rid of this page. We don't need it anymore. And then we'll be adding some custom links to this menu. So the first one will be about me. And the magic here happens when we pass that ID to this URL. So for example, for the about me, we can pass the about me ID. We can of course add it to the menu. This is the first item. And then we can go ahead and pass the other ones. So works. And the last one, contact. I can spell it. Contact. Save this menu, and then go to the front end, reload this, and now we got the 3 menus here. And look what will happen when I click this first item. It works. And the second one works too. The last one, go back to the first one. All right, all is working. The great advantage is that now your client, if he or she wants, they can go ahead and then create another menu or just edit the text for this menu items, whatever. Of course, if they want to create similar menu items, such as these ones here, they will need to create another HTML section with an ID and so on. But the good thing is that now we managed to translate the template menu to our WordPress structure. There's one more additional step we have to take, because if we inspect this page here and look at how the responsive menu is behaving, we can click here, for example, and notice that they are not correct here, because they needed to be centered here on the page and not hidden like this. If we look at the original template, you see that it's different. Notice. What happens is that if you look at the HTML structure of both menus, you see that in this original menu, we have a nav with the class of navigation, and then we have this UL here with the primary nav class, and then the allies inside this UL. But in the other hand, if we look at our themes menu, you see that it's a bit different. So here we have, instead of that nav and then the UL, we have a div in between those two elements. So this div here is, it's in the way, actually, you have to get rid of it. And the UL, it doesn't have that class that we needed, that primary nav class. And that's why this menu is not styled correctly. So I have to take care of all of those elements. But in fact, it's very easy to do that in WordPress. You have to pass 2 more arguments to that WP nav menu function. Let's go ahead to our code again. If you look at the functions documentation, you see that we have first this menu class argument. And this one is responsible for passing the CSS class to use for the UI element, which forms the menu. The default is the menu class. That's why we have that UL element in our theme with the class of menu. We have to actually add one more class to it, and it will be styled correctly. And for the div that is in between the nav and the UL, we have to get rid of it using this container class. This container argument determines whether to wrap the UL and what to wrap it with. The default is a div, but if we pass an empty value, that div will simply disappear. So let's move on to our code again, to our WP nav menu function, and let's pass those 2 new arguments to it. So this first one here will be menu class. Let's set it as primary nav, and then container and empty value. All right, let's save this and look at the front end once again. Reload this. Open the menu again, and now it's more like it. If you look at the source code again, you see that now you don't have that div in between the nav and the UL, and the UL now has this primary nav class. It's all working as expected. It's all good, but I have a challenge for you guys. Notice that we have this last portion here, which is actually a menu too. So if we go to our code, to the footer of it, you see that we have this UL element here, which tells us that this is actually a menu. We're supposed to maintain, to keep the same structure here. It will be a social media menu with the links to some social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And I wonder if you guys can do that on your own. It's very simple, because actually you have one of those tasks already completed for you. So in functions.php, we have already registered this location here called social media. So you don't have to do it. But in order for you to register this second menu, I will give you some hints, okay? So the first thing, you have to create, of course, your new menu in the admin, and then assign that second menu position to that newly created menu, and then create the menu items as custom links to the same way we did for the first menu. But notice two interesting things. First one is that in order for the menu to display correctly, in the text portion of the menu in the admin, you have to pass this I element here, right? The link itself, it doesn't matter because you can pass this hashtag instead of the real URL, doesn't matter, okay? But in the text portion, you have to pass this I element for all the menu items, all right? And one more thing you have to be aware is that you need to pass this class to the UL element. And you guys already know how to do that. I showed you in this very lesson. And then once you have registered and created your menu, use the WP nav menu function and then call it within this paragraph, right? Instead of this UL. And I think I have helped you a lot, actually. So go ahead and try it. If you have issues trying to add this menu, go to the next lesson and I'll show you guys how to complete this task, all right? So that's it for this lesson. Hope you liked it. All the best for you guys and see you in the next one. Bye.